What I wanted to talk about tonight is, again, I don't think many Zen teachers talk plainly about this kind of stuff, but why do we focus so much on the posture? Why do you sit in that kind of posture? What's the purpose of it? And, common sense kind of explanation is that we know that the way that we hold the body affects the mind. We know that, for example, if I have this kind of posture, I will tend to have an increase in spinning thought. We know this experientially. We know this from our own training. We don't need anyone to tell us this. I know that if I sit this way, I'll start to get sleepy or dull or cloudy. I know that if I put too much arch in my back, there would be a feeling of energetic rising. And again, an increase in kind of spinning, but also anxiety and tension. Also, I can't breathe that way. The diaphragm doesn't function, so that contributes to that. What else? If I sit kind of back, it may appear sort of straight, but it's kind of dead posture. And again, there will be sort of a dullness or cloudiness that comes out. We know these things. We know these things from when we're kids. If you hold your body in a particular way, you'll be more alert. If you hold it another way, you'll tend not to be. But from the standpoint of our practice, which is essentially, I'm often saying, a yogic practice, meaning this is not a primarily intellectual undertaking, or Zen is not something that you understand conceptually, but experientially you have to have a realization, not essentially different from what the Buddha had at some level. And then that becomes the basis of the path, and we walk that path our whole lives. Because it's that kind of path, a yogic undertaking, we have to use the whole existence to accomplish it. You already know that just understanding something intellectually is not enough to solve your fundamental existential angst. Right? You already know that reading a Buddhist book is not the same as experiencing what the Buddha experienced. You may get some taste of it. You may be able to sometimes get some experience of it from the words, but most generally speaking, more commonly speaking, those kinds of books, like the sutras, of course, and all the writings of the great masters, came out from someone's experience. The experience came first. So the Zen path is for you to have that experience directly, using the same kinds of methods they used, rather than reading their words after the fact and trying to catch it from them. Although it's not impossible, it can happen. Yeah, that's no problem. So that being the case, what do we have to work with? Just this. You think that there's some kind of an ultimate reality or truth separate from so-called relative truth or the mundane world. This is it. This is all we have. This mind-body, so-called phenomena. This is precisely all we have to work with. If you really understand all of this, you do understand ultimate, so-called ultimate truth. The ultimate and relative truth are not different things. We could say they're different ways of seeing. So we have to start with this body-mind. We say body-mind because from the Zen standpoint, they're not ultimately separate at all. Your body arises in a causal relationship with the so-called mind. It's not the Western way to think, usually. I shouldn't say Western, modern way to think. Where the mind is something separate from the body. If the body dies, maybe the mind dies too. That's not the Buddhist view at all. The body, such as it is, has arisen in a kind of a causal relationship with the so-called mind stream. And even after the death of this body doesn't mean that mind stream ends. There's a continuity of it, and there's another body that's taken up and again and again and again. That's the Buddhist teaching, anyway. So this body-mind is our only tool. It's the only thing I have. And it's why in the traditional Buddhist teachings, to be reborn in the human form with a reasonably healthy body and mind, and with access to the teachings, or even to be born in a time where the teachings exist, is considered so incredibly rare, such a situation of inconceivable good fortune, that there's no conceiving of it, how precious it is. so we should use it. So that's why we're so concerned with this stuff. If we come around and adjust, okay, now I'm talking about zazen posture, right? Let's talk practically. It's not because you are not aesthetically correct. It's not because you don't look like this statue enough and we want you to because it's pretty or something like that. It's because of the statue is showing us from a standpoint of practice how we should arrange ourselves to bring the practice to fruition. You have to understand why that is or how that is. Okay, let me say it this way. Our normal way of experiencing, which we call delusion or ignorance, is completely ass backwards. We live the suffering, we live the result of that constantly. We believe somehow that I'm a being in my skull behind my eyes, and this is my body, which is something separate from that, and this is the floor, and this is the cup, which is something even more separate from that. We split the universe into pieces like that. We believe that somehow the sort of sensory impressions that these organs, my eyes, my ears, my nose, and so on, are picking up and sending to my brain where my brain is interpreting. We think somehow that's objectively real, as in the manner that I sense it. That cushion is over there. I believe even that word cushion is real and applies to something over there. This is a completely wrong way of seeing from a Buddhist standpoint. It's not wrong in that it's not, it's useful. We again, relative world. But if we look more closely at the so-called relative world, we could discern the more deep meaning. We could see more clearly. So the way of sitting, the posture, is one of the first steps to being able to do that. That way of seeing is like it's like a movie that we're playing in our minds. If you go to, old style film, everything is digital now, right? But the old style film has frames. And it goes like this, and it runs, and you see a projected picture. The reality, that picture's not real. All there are these individual frames, separated. But when they're played in a certain way, the illusion of continuity and reality comes out. You don't know that that's exactly how your own mind is. There's no such thing as a continuity of consciousness. There's a discrete moment of awareness which arises and dies and creates the causal conditions for the next one to arise. If you go deeply into Zen samadhi, you actually have that experience of the entire universe arising and passing away, being completely and utterly destroyed moment by moment. Because that's actually what your mind is. It's a succession of moments. It's with an illusion of continuity. I'm not talking theoretically, I'm talking experientially from a yogic standpoint. You have that experience. So what it means is that by using the body, this tool, as I said, the only thing we have, the body, the breath, the mind in unity in a particular ways, I'm going to get back to the posture in a moment, we're able, through these very ancient techniques, to insert a knife into that imaginary continuity. We're able to see the gaps and start to understand more clearly what it actually is. We're able, again, to observe that so-called relative truth and see more clearly what it is. That seeing is itself the so-called ultimate or absolute truth. When you see that way, you cannot say clearly, my awareness is here and not there. I cannot say clearly, that's the cushion over there and I'm here and they're separate. I cannot say clearly where my body begins and ends. I cannot say where my awareness actually is. And I cannot say that I'm separate from the rest of the so-called phenomena. All I could say is that the one mind, the ultimate, if we use that word, absolute reality, is precisely this in its suchness, in its moment by moment isness. It is this. We say Zen is a non-dual teaching. It doesn't mean the experience of non-duality, meaning a non-separation from things. I don't become one with something. We use that kind of language, but that's not what non-dual means from the Zen standpoint. From a Zen standpoint, non-dual wisdom means the so-called ultimate absolute truth and right here are not dual. We don't experience them as different. The common understanding of non-dual, somehow I become one with everything, like that stupid hot dog joke. You do have that experience in samadhi, a feeling of connectivity, but you don't become one with anything. There's no things to become one in that way of experiencing. So oneness talk can be problematic. But anyway, how do we break that common way of seeing and our fascination with the playing of the movie on the screen and actually be able to see the individual frames or understand what's actually happening? That's what meditation is, what samadhi, the state of meditative absorption, is for. Okay. Can you close that door, please? So I want to talk about that. What I want you to view the body as is not, first of all, not you. It is you, but it's not you. You're not limited by it. I certainly don't want you to view it during sesshin as something that's just there to cause you discomfort, although discomfort comes. That's not the purpose of that training, as you know. But from the standpoint of our yogic practice, our meditation practice, this body is the vessel within which the breath and the subtle energetic system has to start to function in a different way. In other words, we create that vessel in a certain form. And because we do that, the functioning of the mind and the subtle winds or energetic qualities of the body can start to shift. Because that vessel is more correct and integrated. So the first thing we look at is the body integrated? In other words, most fundamentally, our upper and lower body unified at the pelvic girdle. That's the place where upper and lower body meet. Right? You know, I have a spine back here. There's no bone in the front holding anything up. That's the only bone. So this is a really important area. If things are not aligned and I'm not using the musculature in a particular manner, then I can't hold myself up. Or I should say we can find endless ways to hold ourselves up inefficiently or incorrectly. Right? So the first thing we learn, of course, when we learn the zazen posture, is how to let the pelvis settle. And that unifies functionally, structurally, the upper and lower body. And from there, we learn to gently stretch up with the rest of the spine and to have this sort of correct position. And we find ourselves with practice. And, learning that as a habitual tension comes in, we can release it again and again. Eventually, we find ourselves settling in a place of kind of a neutral alignment with gravity. It's effortless. I don't feel like I'm trying to stretch up tall. I mean, I know I don't look ramrod straight or anything like that, and you don't have to. You should have a natural posture. I don't think the Buddha statue looks like this. It's very settled, very relaxed, and it's a good model. That statue is not a bad one, actually. So you learn by setting the pelvis a particular way, stretching up through the spine, and finding with the correct number of cushions and how to arrange the legs in a particular way. And over time, as everything loosens up, you find that you can settle in a place which is aligned with gravity and effortless. So the sort of opposing forces in the body's balance, or they cancel each other out. There's nothing which is off or being held. And of course, we know how to use the eyes. We have all those small details of zazen posture which help contribute to the mind becoming more open and free and settling and so on. But when we create this vessel of the posture, now we look at the breath, which is the next big pillar, along with the body of zazen. And because that vessel has been formed in a particular way, the diaphragm can function freely and the breath can settle. The stomach can sort of relax and hang, the solar plexus becomes soft, and we feel just with the way we're breathing that somehow everything's dropping. I'm not breathing up here, but the breath has somehow come down to here. I mean, we know that the breath, even though we say breathe to your belly, breathe to the tongue, we know you don't have lungs in your bowels, right? But the sensation is like that everything has dropped down. So this vessel now, which has a kind of a nice, correct, integrated form aligned with gravity and with no undue tension anywhere, now the breath is settled in it as well. And the more you cultivate that, again, we say breathe to the tonden, and we have this way of breathing called tonden soku we learn and so on, which is just a refinement of all that. Something starts to activate here in the base of this vessel. the energetic currents of the body gather there. And something starts to catch on fire. Something starts to glow. And the more you practice, the more you settle, the more this process starts to gather steam like a snowball rolling downhill. At some point, there's a kind of an overflowing, and it radiates through the body. When the energetic system, the currents of the body radiate in that manner, and you unify in your mind, your concentration with them in the manner we do when we breathe the count or we work on the koan, what it means is suddenly you have changed your whole sense of somatic awareness. You are no longer existing behind your eyes. This whole vessel is it's your body, but the awareness feels all of it equally. I cannot say if my mind is here or here. I'm talking experientially. I know the brain is here, and if you shoot my brain, then something changes in my awareness rather dramatically. We know that. But experientially, somehow our awareness permeates the fiber, the tissue of the physical frame. And when you sit in that manner, when you look at the Buddha statue, does he look like he's thinking something in his mind? There's something about that posture, the totality of the being or the awareness permeates the whole frame. That's what this posture is meant to encourage or to allow you to actualize. It's a very stable posture, again, aligned with gravity, in which the breathing can function, the energetic currents of the body can settle, and because of that, we can unify our mind with the whole vessel that I was born with, that I inherited from my parents, this body-mind. All of it can unify and function together. And with that, we unify, again, the method of the meditation. So it means when I work on so-called mu, for example, the first koan many of you work on, I'm not working on mu here. I cannot say there's any place of my body that's not working on mu. Mu is down in my toes. Or if I breathe the count, we always say, don't count your breath, set up the count as a mental concept, and then you are the observer watching your count or watching your belly move. It's okay for beginners. But that's not being unified with the method of the breath counting. It's just another dualistic way of looking at something. So we say, don't count the breath, breathe the count. That's experience I'm trying to point at right now. You will experience this whole frame, this whole body-mind is breathing the count. The count is here and here and here and here and here. And this is achieved physically through, again, creating that vessel in a particular integrated way that allows the energetic system of the body to ultimately radiate through it powerfully, and riding those winds, energetic winds, so to speak, the mind permeates the whole body. What it means is that when you have that condition, very easily you can start to dissolve or step out a little bit from that habitual delusive way of seeing, that dualistic way of seeing I was describing. You start to experience, as I said, that I don't know where my awareness is. I cannot say I'm me, I'm the cushion is looking at me, I'm looking at the cushion. All of that, those kind of habitual ways of seeing which are so rigid, and the projection on the screen. You don't see that anymore. You start to see the frames. I'm speaking a little metaphorically right now. You will actually have that experience, as I said, of those discrete moments of consciousness. But here I'm trying to say again, it's like you insert a knife in between the moments of habit, and you start to see very differently. When you go into that samadhi condition, you can't say, if someone asks you, are you counting your breath? You might answer, yeah, I'm doing breath counting. But your experience is not, I'm counting a breath. All I could say is there's counting. Or there's a breath, there's a count being breathed by who? By me? No me. I can't say where it's happening. That's the real breath counting. You might feel the room is breathing, you might feel the universe is breathing. But it's not even then a feeling of, oh, I've become one with the universe and now I'm the universe breathing. There's much less anyway. I in it. And there's no conceptual thought like that. So needless to say, when you work on the koan, like the question, who am I or mu, when you breathe. It's not you thinking words. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? It's not like that. Because it's not happening here. If you're still at the stage where you're pondering the question and you haven't yet learned how to, with your whole body, become the question, then this kind of fruition I'm describing is what needs to happen. There's an old image of a meditator being like an incense burner, not this kind where we put sticks, the kind I have on the Gomadan down in the training hall that has a lid on it. You hold the coals, you put the granulated incense in it, you can put the lid on, and the smoke comes out from the vents of the lid. You've seen this kind of incense burner. The meditator is supposed to be like that. You're supposed to be burning with the energetic fire of your integrated body-mind, and the scent that comes out from that is the power of your samadhi. When you hold the koan, you're holding it in the pit of your body. I don't know if I'm describing this stuff clearly, but I want you to understand that your meditation, whether it's a breath counting or the koan or anything, if you are working on it with your mind, you have not yet learned how to meditate. And you don't understand why we make you sit in this uncomfortable posture for so long. If it were just pondering something, thinking about something, do it lying down. Do it in an easy chair. There's no reason not to. But instead we establish this vessel, we set up the energetic currents in the breath in a particular way, and here's that language I don't always like, but you become one with the count, one with the koan, which is to say, your whole body mind becomes the koan, is the koan. Not become one with something, but it is one, two, or who am I, or like that. Mold this vessel into that yogic posture. Set the breath like the burning coal in the bottom of the incense burner. And then the energetic overflow, like the smoke, goes through the whole frame. The final thing I'll say about this is what this means also for the practice in Zen after awakening, after you have a clear insight, so kensho, or clear recognition of your nature and so on, those words we use. What it means is then that wisdom, by means of the same psychophysical or body-mind way of training, because your mind stream is, as I said, sort of we say kind of riding the energetic currents of the body, permeating every bit of tissue in the frame, it means when that deep revolution within your body-mind, which we call awakening or kensho or insight, occurs, that is made to ride those energetic currents, also to permeate the body. It's the liberation of the body through this psychophysical method that is the actual fruition of Zen. Zen is not a psychological revolution alone. It's not, to be deeply enlightened. It's not you have some great understanding and something changed deep in your mind. The whole thing has to change. The whole body has to change. We can look at someone's body and we can see there's some degree of insight there or not, because there are certain things that manifest and change in the person's body when it has been made to penetrate. So we say that the wisdom, enlightenment, has to penetrate the bones. This is not a poetic saying. This is literal. It has to go all the way deep into the actual marrow of your body. Your body transforms and is liberated. Why is that necessary? Because, as I said, the body itself has arisen in relationship with the mind. The body itself is showing or entwined with fundamental delusion as much as your so-called mind. So when you have a deep insight, and when it permeates or penetrates the body, this will change too. You can see it if you look at photos of people in the course of their training, after 2 years, after 5 years, after 10 years. If their training is correct, it's like it's not the same person. Physically, I don't just mean what they're experiencing mentally. So, especially new guys, you're down there in the Zendo doing sesshin. We just finished the first day of sesshin. You're suffering, have a lot of pain. You're not used to this much sitting, maybe. That's okay. This is your tool. This is the car that you brought to the race. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not pleasant, but that's okay too. But you try moment to moment to discipline yourself, and you challenge yourself. You want to move, you don't move. You want to fidget, you try not to. Instead, you try to relax and breathe through it. You notice that you're like this. You notice. That's the progress. That's what we call mindfulness. You're aware of what's happening. It means your mind is into your frame. Good for you. So relax and change it. And 1 minute or 30 seconds or 10 seconds later, you're back where you started. That's okay. You notice again and you change it again. And you do that 1 million times, and that's how you break the habit. You change, transform this vessel. So I don't know if this is helpful for you, but please don't think of this posture as an aesthetic form. Don't think of it as a rigid military thing that we enforce just because we like to line people up that way. This is like a hollow clay vessel or a vessel made of crystal, and if the alignment and the form of it are correct, then the furnace gets lit. And then something really starts to happen. We're using the body and the mind to transcend so-called body and mind. But your training, you have to understand, is a psychophysical one. I hope you can actualize all of these things I'm talking about. And again, it's hard to give the sense experientially of what I'm talking about, maybe. But just let the words percolate and digest. And go back to your practice. And again, work with breathing and posture. Endlessly refine breathing and posture, and extend your awareness dynamically. That's the simple way to say it. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.